So hello everyone, and welcome to our third MEIEA Meets. My name is Armen Shaomian, and I am the president of MEIEA, the Music and Entertainment Industry Educators Association. MEIEA is in its 40th year, and while we had to cancel our annual summit in Washington, D.C. This past March, we are looking forward to bringing you an online virtual summit this October instead. Additionally, MEIEA will be offering a free year of academic membership to all current and new members starting today. We will be sending you an email with some more information at the end of this. Meanwhile, please visit MEIEA.org for the latest information. And if you'd like to reach me directly, my email is president@meia.org. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this meeting will be recorded for archiving purposes as well as posted on our YouTube channel, so that those that are unable to attend can still access the resources and conversations that we're sharing during this session. Today's MEIEA Meets topic will focus on faculty research and data analytics presented by Chartmetric, which you will learn more about in a few minutes. First, I'd like to introduce Terry Tompkins, who is a MEIEA board member, and he's also assistant professor and coordinator of the music business program at Hofstra University. Terry.
Hey everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining. I'd like to introduce our fellow panelists who helped assemble the topic, content for the topic today. We have Ulf Osterle, who is, what is your title, Ulf, at Syracuse? Assistant professor?
Right now, assistant professor, yes.
Okay, I know it's been changing over the years. We have Jeremy Peters from Wayne State. Mm-hmm. Say hello, Jeremy. Where are you, Jeremy? There you are. And we have Mehmet Dede from the University of Hartford. So welcome all. I would say that like all of us, we all have questions that we want to have answered, and I don't know that any of us are experts. So we're gonna rely on you as well to be active participants. I also wanted to introduce our colleagues from Chartmetric, who we'll hear from in a little bit. We have Jason Joven and Rutger. Give me your last name again, Rutger.
Rosenborg.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we'll talk to you guys in a couple minutes. I thought since we get a bunch of not so familiar faces in these things that if everybody could put their name, title, and university in the chat box so that we can all kind of get acclimated with each other. So maybe give it a minute and just put your name, title, and university in the chat box. Everybody know where the chat box is? Hopefully we're all fortunately or unfortunately acclimated with Zoom at this point. We're teaching through this platform. So take a minute and include your name, title, and university in the chat box. We've assembled sort of like an outline of several different topics and subtopics. We're going to start with research resources and type of research. Then we're going to segue into the Chartmetric presentation. Then we're going to move into funding resources. And then we're going to finish with publications, targeted publications. One of the outcomes that we're hoping from this, and we've been working on this for a little bit, and it's a work in progress, is a document we'll refer to as a white paper. And maybe Ulf, could you just talk about that for one quick sec, just what the white paper is?
Absolutely. You know, I think all of us are looking for opportunities to publish our research somewhere. And most of us here are focused on creating research for music business, entertainment industries, and the number of journals that are specifically dedicated to this particular topic are fairly few and far between. We do have the MEIEA journal, but outside of that, there aren't many resources. And so in my experience with some of the younger faculty, they're always looking for a new place to publish what they've done. And so, you know, at the end of our presentation today, we've got a list of about 30 or so journals that have published music business research in the last few years, as well as examples of some of the research that they have posted. So, you know, that's a document that can certainly be expanded. If there are journals that you've been a part of publishing in or have sought out for submissions, by all means, let us know, and we'll add that as a resource for everyone within MEIEA.
All right, great. So Mehmet is going to issue a poll, and we have a couple. Actually, we don't have the poll. Do we have the poll access, or do you want to do a raise hands, Mehmet?
Raise hands.
Okay. So we're just going to.
But you have a Survey Monkey
feedback survey at the very end that will
Yeah,
be
we'll do a
posted.
feedback survey at the end. We'll also distribute the white paper, and then the MEIEA membership email will go out if you're interested in being a member, a complimentary member of MEIEA this year. How many people here on this call, did you guys know how to do raise hands? Raise hands under the chat box next to participants. How many people have been published? Raise your hand if you have been published in an academic journal previously. There's a raise hand function, or you can raise your hand manually. So I'm only seeing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Looks like we've got, what do you got, Mehmet? Top about 5? 5
I'm raising
about
my
4.
hand.
Yeah, I've got
raising my
1, 2,
hand.
3, 4, 5, and then a couple of hands on top of the, okay.
Yeah.
So about half. And how many here are, we'll clear that. Can we clear that, Armen? How many here are actually looking to get published in the next year or two? Raise your hand if your goal is to publish within the next year. Does everybody have that goal? Okay, fantastic. I'm going to bring Clyde into this conversation. I see Stan's on the call too. We'd love to see you, Stan, because I know you've done a lot of research in the past. So, we'd love to see and hear from you. Clyde, what is your process? You've been published in a number of journals. Are you choosing a topic first? And is the topic based on your expertise or your interest? Or are you looking at the journal and then backing yourself into?
Oh, I always start with the topic. And if I'm not interested in it, I'm not going to write it. I mean, writing for me, it's difficult, it's laborious, it's antisocial. It's the perfect time to be a writer, right? Because you can stay at home and, but yeah, I find it, I enjoy having it done, but going through the process is not something that's real fun for me always. And so I need to have a topic that I'm really motivated to write about, interested in writing about. So I think you write the best article you can on a topic that you're passionate about, and then you find a home for it. There are a number of journals out there. And so, I was always told, target the best journal first. And, if you don't get in, they don't give you a rewrite, at least you can take the comments from the reviewers and, work your way down the list till you find an appropriate home for it.
Okay, let me pose that same question to Stan. Can you unmute there, Stan?
Thank you, Terry. I have some noise going on in the background because I'm having some Windows installed, so there's some Sawzall work and stuff like that, so I hope you can hear me. I like to co-author. And because sometimes, sometimes I come up with some ideas, but I don't necessarily have the delivery mechanism in place. Either it involves some kind of programming language or some kind of statistical tool that, I'm not an expert in. And sometimes the opposite. Sometimes someone else reaches out to me with a great idea and they are in the same situation. They can write the narrative part really well, but they rely on me to do the methodology and the statistical work or the modeling. And, so it has been good for me. It also allowed me to publish in journals that are not necessarily thought as music industry journals. So,
for example?
I don't know, like some tech journals, like some technology entrepreneurship type journals, stuff like that, or marketing journals, like straight business journals that, sometimes are hungry for a topic that, is appealing, which is the music business. And but sometimes to publish in these journals, you need to know the literature really well, that they expect you to deliver with them. And if it's not a field that you've worked in for a long time, you don't know the literature really well, you don't know what's been done, what hasn't been done, what's hot right now, it has helped me to work with people who are experts in that particular field. And it's been fun to expand and introduce a new audience to what we do.
Let me bring Larry into the conversation. Larry, can you unmute? Larry from Belmont. The ultimate in publishing is publishing a book, right? and you've got a book out, right? And was it a goal to put out a book? I mean, how do you get to the point where you're putting out a book that's published on the music industry?
Well, I tend to slide along with Clyde there on that one. It's really tough. It takes years, and you'll never, you know, you're going to come down to not making any money. But I do it simply because the information isn't out there, and I have a different kind of skew on stuff. So I've had my first book was 30 years ago, and it was a Billboard book, and I did a bunch of interviews with people in the industry, and then I went back and realized they are saying it better than I'm saying it. So I cleaned up all of their interviews and put it in a book and got published with Billboard, which was probably the first one at Belmont for forever. But the other thing is that self-publishing today has really become important. Most of the people you're writing for in journals and all that have no clue about what's really going on in this industry. The huge amount of copyright violations, blah, 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 blah. So you might want to think about, I tend to look at the big picture and then figure out, okay, with a little bit of depth, what is publishing? What is songwriting? What is a label do? What do these people do? Because that's what the consumer wants to know. And what you've got is this kind of huge cliff between how the industry really works and how people think it works. And you've got it, so it's information, but you have to say it in a language that is basically at a high school level or less, because that's where people are at today. They don't read anymore in most cases. So, you know, videos that you accompany with the book is really important. I've had so many publishers who want me. I just had one this morning who said, we want to publish another one of your books. Well, I'm going like, do I really want to do that? Clyde's right. We're under AACSB, so we have to do academic research. So I would encourage you to think of journals first, but I tend to think of who's going to read this stuff and what do I want to say in it that would be helpful. And right now, there's a tremendous opportunity. I don't know how I can emphasize this more, and I appreciate the opportunity to say something. I suggested this to our faculty and basically was told to buzz off. But the reality is there's a huge opportunity out there because this is no longer the music industry that people thought it was. It just doesn't exist anymore. If you're telling about record sales and blah, 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 the thing you got to do is say, well, it's only 20% anymore. You know, they're making $1 million an hour streaming. So what I do is I go to corporate reports first. I read Warner Music and Universal Music and Sony Entertainment corporate reports every year. And that tells me what they're doing. It tells me where the money's coming in. It tells me what they're going to look for. I look at the IFPI, which is the same thing as the RIAA in the US. Well, you got to look at this shit. And they have just tons of stuff that will give you clues onto what's going on. Then I make phone calls to people I know in the industry and I talk about it. And they say, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. So I find out what's real and what's not real. And I would encourage you not to waste your damn time on stuff that you think is relevant. Go to the sources where things are happening and actually analyze it yourself, and then go to get backup information from people in the industry who are usually, quite honestly, happy to talk to you. And then find out what's going on there, merge the two concepts together and write thinking about that the audience is your student. And they want to be everything from just a local musician doing weddings to a huge superstar. So that's I hope that's helpful to you guys.
Very helpful. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned journals and trade publications and consumer pubs. Mehmet, you talked about the library as a resource. Can you talk a little bit more about that in the past?
Yes, absolutely. So whenever I assign students a research project, usually google.com is the first entry point for a lot of them. I'm sure you have the same feeling. But I try to encourage them to go beyond just Google. In fact, I usually try to direct them to the library. And nowadays, obviously, it's going to be our online libraries. But in our library, there are databases specifically for music and music business. Your library probably has them as well. Music Index is one of those databases. Realm, RILM is another one. Academic Search Premier. These are all databases that a lot of libraries are subscribed to. So that's a good starting point if you have the keywords. Then I would recommend encyclopedias. Oxford is a good one. Grove Music Online, that's another one. Those are also bibliographies that they really help you go to the sort of like right source. And then outside the library, actually one more as part of the library, a lot of libraries are putting out COVID-19 resources because they have to move things online. So that's really useful in understanding what is available from home for you with sort of like a password and a username that you have to put in. But a lot of the stuff that our library has at the University of Hartford is been transitioning online, and I can find a lot of stuff without actually going to the library these days. So those are the library sources. Then I have two websites that I start with usually for my research. One is Internet Archives. That's at archive.org. This is a nonprofit organization that was founded in the 90s. It's basically like a digital library. They have over 20 million books and texts. But what's really interesting about them is that they also index web pages. They have over 400 billion web pages indexed. And that's really useful because with the stroke of a key, you can really find a lot of articles, you know, going back from the 90s, 80s, you know, whatever, not 80s, but 90s really, whatever was indexed on the website. In the internet. Most of them are in English, some are in English. Besides English, there's also German, Chinese, French, German, a bunch of other languages as well. The other resource that I use online is Google Books, which is different than Google Scholars. Google Books has 25 million books, so it's comparable to Internet Archive. It lets you full view. It lets you view just only portion, whatever the publisher has allowed. And I also should probably also add that the Internet Archives allows you to borrow books for a limited time or a few hours, whatever the case might be. So these are all wonderful resources that libraries have, but that the internet also provides way past google.com. And I encourage everyone to use these.
Thanks, Mehmet. Ulf, you're a quantitative and a qualitative guy as far as your research. Can you talk about some of the quantitative stuff, resources and processes?
Sure. You know, for me, I'm teaching in two different areas. One of those areas is really focused on data, and using Chartmetric has been a big part of that. And I think we're at no better time in the music space than to look at big data to try to draw some insights from what we can see with social media, with streaming numbers, with followers. You can get sales in there as well. And so, you know, primarily I'm looking at it from an A&R standpoint, finding those independent unsigned acts, and, you know, what are the points at which we should really be paying attention to who they are to bring them into the system if you're a publisher or if you're a label or an artist manager. And so from the quantitative side, it's really the numbers there in the streaming world and social media world.
If I may support you on that, the labels don't do anything at all, even don't sign artists till they do, as an example, a psychographic analysis of them. I had one friend that I helped get signed at Warner, and I asked the woman about it, and she said, well, we did a psychographic analysis, blah, 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 blah. In other words, they're doing, they don't do anything today, and this also includes, in many cases, artist managers. They don't do it unless they have the data, and they look at all that data. They look at what people have done out there and who's noticing. And then if they notice that there is an audience, they may not even agree with the music, but if there's an audience, they say, well, can we then blow it up based on the typology of consumers who are digging it, and then go ahead and move on that. So the big data is really important that we get deeply into that, because that's really what they're using today. It's not gut reaction anymore. It is big data reinforces what they're trying to do. So hope that's helpful. So way to go. Yeah, Doc.
Thanks, Larry. Gigi has a good question in there. I want to address that, but I want to bring the Chartmetric people on because we're in data mode now. So I wanted to maybe go through, talk to these guys, make their presentation. And I think case studies are a really important topic, Gigi. So, and I think somebody said that Morgan has been published with case studies though. Let's get to that after we talk to Rutger and Jason. So Rutger, Jason, welcome to MEIEA. Yeah, you guys, what are your titles? Can you tell us your titles at Chartmetric? What your
Yeah,
role
sure,
is?
Terry. I'm Jason Joven, manager of content insights at Chartmetric. Been there since 2017.
And Rutger?
Rutger Rosenborg. I'm the digital strategy lead, and I've been at Chartmetric just over a year.
Okay, and you guys actually come from academic music business programs?
We do. We both graduated from the NYU Steinhardt Music Business Master's program.
Very cool.
Big
And
Larry
for
Miller fans we are.
Yeah. And for those who are not familiar with Chartmetric, what would be like, what's your elevator pitch to somebody about Chartmetric?
Sure, thanks, Terry. And first of all, thanks Armen, Terry, and everyone at MEIEA for having us today, and thanks for everyone for showing up. So Chartmetric is Silicon Valley-based. I don't even know if we're qualified as a startup anymore, but we started in about 2016. We're a team about 15, 20 people, and we make this platform, a subscription-based platform where we collect data from over 2.2 million artists. We have it in a playlist lens, in a geographic lens, if you want to look at certain cities around the world. And we take care of like all kind of like music business analytics from social media side. So it could be TikTok, it could be Instagram followers, it could be Facebook fans, and also the streaming side as well. So Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and a couple other platforms as well. And we kind of put them all in one place and use data science to help organize it, clean it, and synthesize it in a way that it doesn't become too overwhelming. But essentially, our customers are music labels, artists, artist teams, managers, people in the live space, which are now very much more in the digital space. And anyone who has at least one foot in the music industry and wants to track these business related metrics and use it to make smarter, faster business decisions.
Yeah, and I'd argue the point, not only do we as academics have to be acclimated, kind of reinforcing Larry's point, but our students need to be familiar with this platform, and it's an expected core competency upon entering the field. So what we're offering, what Chartmetric is offering for faculty who are on this call today is a 60-day, is it till December 31st, or is that just 60 days from now?
No, 60 days whenever you activate it.
Okay, 60-day premium access to Chartmetric, which I'm going to put in the chat. It'll have a code, and it'll tell you how you can register for it. But so while we're there, we thought, let's give a little demo of Chartmetric and show everybody what you're all about.
Cool.
You want to get that started?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Terry. I'm just going to share my screen. So we thought we've got a few minutes, but we want to kind of like speed through a little bit in case people have questions or maybe you want to go in a certain direction. But we thought a good way to kind of approach this was not just kind of go through a regular walkthrough of Chartmetric, but to kind of use some academic research that Terry shared with us to kind of maybe use it as a way to amplify or find maybe different nuances that you can use Chartmetric for to help, with a certain research question you might have. And so there's this one that Terry and Clyde wrote called a quantitative analysis of the factors attributed to gold, platinum, and multi-platinum records by debut artists from 99 to 08. So we essentially went through and talked about, found a list of essentially success, the artists and those tracks, and then kind of went into a little bit about the categories that they were in and a little bit about the artists themselves. So I think one way to take a look at this particular question using Chartmetric. And by the way, maybe I should take a step back for a second. If you're familiar with other tools such as Next Big Sound, Nielsen Music Connect, those are a couple of similar tools that I think are in a similar music analytics space. In case you're familiar with that, we're kind of in that realm. So hopefully connect Chartmetric to something that you might be more familiar with if you haven't heard about our product yet. But so one section to help address this particular question is our chart section. So essentially, these are all public charts. All the data we get is available publicly, and we aggregate it here. A big thing with Chartmetric, generally speaking, is the time-saving aspect, which I'm sure none of us have enough of. So that's kind of like a big selling point for us, is being able to aggregate all this information, put it in one place. And so if you're particularly looking at a different way to measure success, like let's say if it's not RIAA figures, but maybe something on TikTok, we have TikTok charts where we collect things from the music perspective, but also from the top users perspective. So in case you want to take like an influencer angle, you can do that as well. And you can take a look at, and let me know, by the way, if this is hard to read. I've zoomed in a little bit. I want to make sure everyone is reading this okay. We can take a look at velocity metrics in terms of how many followers a certain influencer or artist has gained in the past week and kind of sort by that. If you're looking at YouTube, for example, you can click on a YouTube chart and it'll take a look day by day, you know, on the YouTube charts. I think it's charts.youtube.com, I think is the website you can kind of access this separately. But we collect it as well and we link it to all the information that we have in Chartmetric. You can kind of go backwards in time. So you can look at either from a historical perspective, but also by region as well, and filter down to, you know, let's take a look at what's been big in Mexico on YouTube. And we can kind of pipe that chart in and then click through to any one of the artists that we have on our platform. So to go further into the artist level, I think this is really the kind of where a lot of, well, it's been proven like that's where most of our users go most of the time whenever they're accessing the tool is the artist page. And that's kind of like where everything kind of comes together. So I'm looking at Ash right now. She had a really big hit with a Netflix show earlier this year. And so I've been looking into her. And so this is kind of her page, which if, by the way, if you see any artists, you can always change their data sources here. But if you ever want to, like just like the question was posed earlier, to take a look at a case study, you know, artist by artist, you can, this would definitely be a good way to take a look at it, because you can not only access a lot of the kind of key performance indicators that an artist might have, for example, how many followers they have on Spotify, how many subscribers they have on YouTube, how many editorial versus total playlists that they have on, you know, Amazon Music, Deezer, what have you. You can also link out to a lot of their own presences on digital platforms. So let's say I want to access their YouTube real quick, I can just click that and it'll go straight to the YouTube page that we have on file. Just for other, you know, for reference, you know, usually a lot of people, whether they're managers or other people on the artist team, if they see something Chartmetric that's not right, in terms of like the right YouTube channel or Instagram handle, what have you, they can change that here so we can update our own resources. And so, you know, essentially you'll see a lot of like over time charts here that kind of sync up by default. I want to highlight one thing that I think is really useful in Chartmetric is kind of like a lot of the kind of features that we have, as I mentioned before, that synthesize our data. So this thing called Cpp Rank, it stands for cross-platform performance. And so essentially it's one of the ways in which we try to put together, excuse me, we try to put together 9 different platforms, for example. And in this case, it's Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, Deezer, SoundCloud, Instagram, Facebook, Wikipedia, and Twitter. So both on the streaming and social side, and then try to develop some kind of like overall popularity metric to kind of synthesize all this information so it's kind of more easier to digest. And that's kind of, I think, one of the places where I think this could be useful for this particular kind of research question, if you want to say, take a look at popularity over time. And, you know, if you want any kind of amplifying information on an artist's story, you can kind of look at this, you know, look at different changes, you know, day by day changes in, you know, YouTube subscribers, channel views, Deezer fans, even Wikipedia views, you know, outside of the normal metrics, which you might expect, you know, whether it's monthly listeners or something like that. We do measure other things like Genius views, for example, if the fans happen to be very lyrically focused, or Wikipedia, which we've kind of written about in the past on our blog, and we have a podcast as well, as kind of a measurement of curiosity, which is maybe not something that you would think of primarily as a metric of success, quote unquote, but something to reference as a possible data source. I'm gonna keep moving on. So another journal piece that Terry had written and forwarded to us was an artist management practicum, teaching artist management in the 21st century. So this was more of a look at how to teach the very complex manner of A&R and management. Well, I'm sorry, not A&R, but management. But a big part of management is the initial part of finding a client. So essentially an A&R kind of skill set. So I kind of wanted to approach this one with something that we call our artist list. And hopefully you can see this okay. This is essentially our entire artist list that we are tracking right now. As you can see, we're at 2.2 million, about to break 2.3 million artists that we collect. We define artist, by the way, as anyone that has, I think, at least a Spotify, Apple Music, or I might be wrong on this, but I think Amazon Music artist profile. And they can basically be an artist on Chartmetric. And so here, I think, is a really cool way of maybe getting down to a certain, let's say, you know, if you want to talk about, you know, the scouting process of, you know, someone you want to manage at some point, you know, maybe I want to focus in on French rappers. So I can click here on France, and then it'll filter our artist list down to artists that we've kind of used our data to determine that they're from France, or at least currently active in France. And then it'll skim down our data set to, it looks like 14,000 that we've at least been successfully able to identify as French. And then you can use a genre filter to go to hip hop and rap. And then eventually we'll get down to, it looks like 1,000 artists that we have as French and hip hop and rap. And you can kind of go through and go to their own artist pages. If you want to, you can also kind of scroll to the right and look at and filter by different things. So Deezer, for example, is its biggest market is in France. And let's say I want to write a piece about or focus on that particular population. I can now see sorted by descending order of Deezer fans, French rap artists. Another thing too, that if you want to get more into like hardcore data is we have a thing called advanced filters, which now you can kind of, if you have a very specific bracket of type of artist that you want, you can kind of narrow that down. So let's say you want to focus in on Spotify monthly listeners between 1 million and 50,000. I can do that and apply that filter and apply it to my current data set, which it looks like we have 361. And so essentially this is another time saver and a way to kind of take advantage of all the breadth of data that's out there, but try to find a way to focus in on the research question that you have. I'm going to go ahead and stop here because I've probably talked too much already. I'll hand it over to my colleague Rutger so we can continue talking a little bit more about the product.
And let me just jump in for 1 sec while Rutger's getting set up. But you can export all that data, right, Jason? So you can repurpose it.
Yes. Yes. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that. On pretty much all of our charts that you see on an artist page or the charts tool itself that I started out with, there's a CSV export button that you have. We also have a exportable PDF tool for reports because you can follow different artists on Chartmetric, and that'll export as a PDF with whatever data that you want to customize it to. We even have email notifications as well. And then also we have an API. If you have a team or you code yourself and you want to have like more hardcore consistent access or have some kind of data dump, we have that as available too.
All right, Rutger.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Screen, cool. So I just want to make a note also that a lot of mine and Jason's work is actually coming up with the research question and using Chartmetric data to attack that question in some way. So like one recent report we did was on COVID-19's effect on in particular Spotify genre. So we used Chartmetric data to answer this question, and this was a combination of Jason and me, and also our data scientist. So it was a big data project, but this was all based on data from Chartmetric. So if you, for example, if you had a question like, what is the effect of a late night TV performance on an artist's digital profile? You could go to an artist page like Jason demonstrated, and there are all these subtabs here that break up the different data sections of an artist's profile. So you could just click to TV and it will take you to their various TV show appearances. And to make it easy, you can just go to the search bar and type in like late to look for late night appearances. And then you can look at the date that they aired. So July 30th, 2019, for instance. And then you can scroll or click back up to social and then look at their various trends, which Jason was showing you with the graphs and the synced charts. And you can look at what happened on a particular date. If you want to work it from the other way around, you can also look at a particular spike, for instance, in say a change spike and what might have influenced that. And then these little icons down here show you what particular event happened. So if it was a live performance or if it was a TV appearance, so in this case, The Voice, So that can be a really useful tool, especially from a case study level. And again, if you do want to export this data in a number of different forms, these are all the different options you have, including CSV. So you can export CSV for multiple different artists if you want to compare across artists using your own methods, like whether it's Excel or Google Sheets. That's how Jason and I work that way a lot of the time, actually. We also have some geographic data. So if you click down to audience, you can see the geographic distribution of an artist's Spotify listeners or YouTube video views. So here you can see like John Legend, for example, he's big in Sao Paulo and Mexico City. And you can see the change over time of these various cities. So for instance, the green line here is Chicago, and you can see that past Sao Paulo in late November, and then it peaked around Christmas time, which makes sense for John Legend, and as did Los Angeles. So obviously his American listeners like to listen to him at around Christmas. So that's a case study way to attack the geographic question. We also have a cities page. So if you scroll back to the top, these are all the different ways we break up data at the market level. We have a cities page, so you can actually look at the data in Mexico City. If you wanted to sort of zoom out and look at what is happening in a particular city, Mexico City, or any city you want. I think we have 16,000 cities, if I'm not mistaken. And here we break down what's happening in terms of local Shazam chart occurrences based on genre. And you can click on any of these graphs and it'll give you a breakdown of the particular tracks within that genre that are being Shazammed. And we have that for airplay too. Right now we have 999 international radio stations. That is dynamic, so it can increase based on customer requests, but that's where it stands right now. You can also see, this is just artists who are from the city and how they stack up metrics wise. And then Spotify monthly listeners, the top artists in terms of that metric, or YouTube or Instagram based solely on this city. So that can be a very useful way to attack a research question from a geographic point of view. And I mean, we could go on. There's a ton of data on Chartmetric. We just wanted to present a couple of different ways that you might be able to attack different questions. But yeah, we're open to any questions you might have of different techniques you can use, different segments of the product that you can use. But I'm gonna stop there, or I will just keep on rambling with all the data we have.
That's good. Thanks for that, Rutger. So we did have a question. Morgan is on the call, and maybe you could ask that question, Morgan. Did you have it answered? Morgan Bryant.
Hi, I did have a question. I had a couple questions actually, particularly with this last section that you guys started going into. I love data and analytics, and I'm over here jotting notes down as you flip through the pages because I see a lot of possibilities there. I do a lot of research in looking at social media and digital consumption in general, particularly in music and entertainment. So I love what you just went through. So I had a couple questions. In that last section that you were just in, Rutger, you did where you clicked on the tab and we were able to look at things in terms of like the TV appearance. There was also a tab for events. And so one of the questions that I had was, does that events tab actually speak to like live performances? So if that artist is on tour and they've got stops on a tour, would those different would the individual tour dates or just like a tour be aggregated? Like how would you be able to see corresponding digital activity based on the fact that they had 2 shows in Nashville last night and then a show in Memphis tomorrow?
Right, so I can share my screen again, actually, so it's easier to see. But so this is the tab you're talking about on the artist page. So this is based on Songkick data,
Okay.
actually. And yes, you can see individual performances. So obviously that's a little less relevant right now with COVID and everything, but we do have all the historical data for the past individual concert appearances. And you can search in this search bar to make it easier if you're looking for a particular venue or, you know, title of a concert or city.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And how far back does that data go?
Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 2016.
Yeah, let me double check. It should be around there, but I'll forward a link into the chat that says where each one of our platforms and how far back it goes.
Okay, great.
Great. If you could come out of the screen share so I can see everybody and see if there's another. We did have somebody note, and I put it in the chat for you, Jason, the coupon code was not working when they entered it. So I don't know if that's a thing to address now, but.
Okay. I guess I'll have to figure out what's
We'll
not
revisit
working.
it. We'll send an email
Yeah.
out to everybody afterwards too. So,
Cool.
and your
Sorry about
contact info will be in there. Any other questions? Got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions? Anybody else want to ask questions about Chartmetric?
There is one that was already answered in the chat about whether or not Chartmetric is okay with us as academics using or publishing charts for charts or graphs for class or publications, and they are quite happy to. No permission needed, but they like being cited. We all do that anyway, so.
Okay, so we can use your charts in our research. We can include them in class. I mean, I use Chartmetric. I have a marketing class that I teach, and I have our students, they presume to be an artist marketing team for a future release, and they have to go through Chartmetric and pull all the historical data on that artist. So it definitely could be used in the classroom in many different contexts, and then of course for your research as well. So thanks guys, Rutger, Jason, that was awesome. You're welcome to hang out. If you want to hang out, we're going to continue on, but
I think there's one more question.
Oh yeah, one more question, good. Good.
Gigi is asking what type of deals for students Chartmetric can offer.
Question.
Yeah, so, you know, in all honesty, we're still kind of like new in formulating a plan to provide access to students. But for now, like, we're super happy to provide free access to students if it's for a certain project or part of the semester, including the professor. And so just feel free to shoot us an email. My personal email is jason@chartmetric.com. Rutger's is rutger@chartmetric.com. You can also use the insights. It goes to both of us. At chartmetric.com, and just let us know what the application is, and I think we can just go from there. We can either do some kind of like umbrella account where it can be the faculty managing, you know, 20 students or something like that, or we can just do another code that hopefully works. I'll check on that again, by the way. But yeah, happy to provide free access for now.
Cool, and I've taken advantage of that opportunity to pass with my class. Cool. All right, was that all the questions? Are we good to move on? All right, thanks guys, we appreciate it. Gigi, while you're still on the call, let's talk about case study. You published case study. Somebody asked a question about case study. Are you there, Gigi? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the question is that I tend to teach with case study after 10 years of teaching at a business school first. And so having to create our own, or in many cases, I'm having students create to actually then share back with the class. But finding a dearth of that, and I don't know, and part of it with case studies is that it tends to also be a question about whether you're incentivized for promotion for publishing case studies, which is a whole nother soap opera. But if there's a good way or place, because I know that we've been building, or I've been building with my classes at UCLA, a lot of multimedia material, which would be great to collaborate around. So it's one thing to have a text case study, but to have lots of textual information that's current that can be used in class. I don't know if there's already a place or space or if that might be something of group interest to be having, you know, primary data information and or current cases that can be digested with students. So.
Yeah, I've used the Harvard Business Review case studies, right? Octone Records and Live Nation, Lady Gaga, which have been tremendous, but there's really not enough of them, and most of those are dated right now. So you're thinking,
Exactly.
can we pull our resources together and collaborate on our own individual work and then begin to share that? Is that sort of what you're
Or
thinking?
some kind of a collaboration means or space, because in many ways, I think each of us has our own footprint, or the blind man and the elephant. Each of us has our different elephant we're seeing. And so I know that, so Storm and I just did the Amplify Music Conference, which quite a few of you were part of, and we've got 39 recorded sessions with live music people from all over the world. How could people use that? I've been building cases locally in Los Angeles with small artists and with nonprofit organizations on management and managing, and about to launch a whole new class in that space in the spring. You know, am I reinventing the wheel? So I can't really take published research and take that necessarily into my class and have that be a valid teaching and collaboration mode. Right now in the digital space, I have my students doing a lot of primary research and gathering stories and gathering case studies. I have nowhere to put the stuff. So I didn't know if that already was a vocabulary, if this is something people need, or if everyone's going around in this current virtual space, rolling their own stuff. And grabbing things as they go by and throwing them in a class space, or if, I mean, HBR stuff's great. I've written case studies like that in the past. Part of it, they then change the data to anonymize it, so it's not actually the real data. Those students think they've seen the Live Nation data, which then ruins it when you actually try to actually have a conversation about Live Nation. So I didn't know if there already was a vocabulary people have been building around this, or if it might be a really interesting percolation.
I'm going to answer from my perspective, because I have my students pulling research as well. And the artist management article that I had published in the MEIEA journal most recently was data that the students put together to establish benchmarks based on the stage of an artist's career, right? And we established 6 stages, and then we looked at everything from social and streaming and touring. And so repurposing that data and then publishing that in a journal article. So it basically was a case study that became a journal article. So that may be one way. I don't know if there's, and I'll leave it open to everyone on the call. Is there a place for case studies to get published? It's not the MEIEA journal, right? We're not really publishing case studies per se. Jeremy, did you want to answer that?
Well, I mean, there's the classic Harvard Business Review or other business schools tend to have a series of cases, and there's, you know, an increasing number of ones on the arts and the music industry. But I think, and we know all of those. I'm working on a couple to try to go down that vein. But in terms of specific places for music industry, like a deep dive of music industry cases to go from, I don't think that's necessarily there. The MEIEA journal obviously isn't at least right now the place to do that. I've seen a couple of case journals, but they tend to be more focused just on general business. It could be a possibility that we reach out collectively as a group and try to engage for a special issue, which might be a way for us to more actively take a role there, especially given all the sort of wealth and how much more easy it is to create multimedia resources. That's definitely a direction that I see case studies going.
Cool.
Maybe another thing we can look at is also when Ulf speaks about it, the white paper, maybe that's another section that we can add there.
Case studies as part of that. Oh.
One more.
If I could just jump in, I think it's important for us to recognize that sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between the content that we might create and produce and what our peers outside of music industry will value when we're on the tenure track. You know, whereas when we're looking at a book, that's sort of the holy grail. Journal articles important. Popular press sometimes is massively important for a wide audience, but our peers outside of the music space might not value that as much. Where does case study fit into this as well? So, that's a conversation that should happen for anyone that is a junior faculty member here with some of those more senior mentors, because you want to be sure that the content that you're creating is going to put you in a position during that tenure track to get credit for that when you do go up ultimately for tenure.
So that's a good segue into kind of what I wanted to talk about next, which was collaboration. And I think Gigi alluded to that as well. So there's faculty and faculty collaboration, either within the institution or outside. There's faculty and student, maybe a student is a research assistant. And then there's faculty and industry. And quite frankly, we haven't seen a lot of faculty and industry collaboration. I wanted to write an article with Ed Waddle from Billboard, and he was writing a book at the time, but I've never had any collaboration with those who work in the industry and in publishing research. Has anybody had any experience in that regard?
Not necessarily publishing research, although I was able to contact folks at Downtown Music Publishing and at Bandcamp for the case studies that I'm working on. They seemed open to it. I think there was a comment earlier from Larry actually mentioning about case studies are difficult because the labels and personal managers don't want to share financial information, and that's definitely true. To Gigi's point, sometimes you can offer to massage that information, but the other methodology is trying to work with maybe some organizations that are more comfortable with that, or focusing a case study or your research on a different area that doesn't touch on the financials. Financials are one part, but you can talk about how they do marketing or how they organize themselves, or depending on, there's lots of different areas you can approach a research article on with a company or on a company from.
Is Clyde on the call still? Did we lose Clyde? I don't see Clyde anymore. Okay. I know Clyde's collaborated with a couple of faculty in publishing a book. Who here has collaborated with faculty, and can you talk a little bit about that? Can anybody, they've jointly written an article or a book together collaboratively? Stan, have you done any collaboration with outside people?
I did, a regional textbook with Robert Wiley. So I've done that. That was fun.
So how does that happen? Do you just say, here's somebody I want to work with? I mean, how does that manifest itself?
Kim introduced us at our last MEIEA summit.
Okay.
So that's how it happened. And usually,
so come to the summit.
Yeah, and we did that BMI, happy hour, and it kind of happened there. And then he put me in touch with his publisher, and they had guidelines, and you just follow the recipe, and there it goes.
Okay.
So that was.
Who else is it? Anybody else had any collaboration? Larry?
Well, one of the things I was going to mention is try to become an expert at something, so that when you offer and talk to the labels, they can actually, excuse me, I'm sorry, they can actually use the information you give them. So years ago, I used to teach a psychographic class where what I would do is I'd go into, this was MCA, they would call me and say, we have a problem with this artist. And I'd say, okay. And so I would use a methodology that I developed to go out and figure out, what was going on with the fans with that artist. And it worked great. And finally, it took a whole lot of time, but finally I made a class out of it. And the class literally went into the meeting room at the label and had to sign a piece of paper, no disclosure whatsoever allowed, could not talk about it outside of the label, and all that jazz. But we basically saved an artist career by doing that. They said they had a problem with an artist, and they said, here's the problem. And, the director comes in from marketing, says, blah, 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 blah. And we go, okay. And then I take the students, I say, okay, now here's what we're going to do. And then let them get totally into it. And it took a lot of time, but it was really, I had students who have come back years later and said, that was such a fantastic opportunity. We don't do that anymore, to be quite honest, because time is money, and there's so much data that is now available to the labels. So when I'm saying become an expert at something, when you want to co-write with somebody, if you have a friend or an acquaintance that is an expert in personal management and another one who's an expert at A&R or label operations, you put those two together and you have some really powerful people. But if you're all trying to do everything, which I tried for a while, it's really difficult. So, you know, but I do appreciate your where we're headed. And if I can be of any help to y'all, please let me know. I'll be glad to help you. And I just think that this is a great time because I keep reinforcing, and the analytics show it, that this is a time when this industry is going through a major change in how this business actually works from almost all levels. There certainly are some licenses that are still relevant and all that jazz, but it's changing. And so I would look for trends. When you filter through all this data that we're going to see, look for trends and then take that and jump into writing articles about it. Case studies are almost impossible to get with realistic information because it's private data that they don't want anybody to know about. So, I mean, I can say things, but when I would use that stuff, I can say as an example and give them only generalities. I'm talking about the students in a class or in a paper. So case studies, God bless you for trying, but they're really tough. Hope that's helpful, and let's work together and try to make something happen. Thanks.
Stan,
So
I have
I've
a hand
had,
raised. I think Morgan wants to say something. Morgan, you want to jump in first?
yeah, I've
Hey.
had a couple of different ways that I've gone about doing collaborative work. So I have multiple collaborative projects going on right now. So one of them I actually have with Eric Holt, who's on the call, and that just came from at the time I was on faculty at Belmont and finding common interests and complementary skill sets, right? So we figured out we had a common interest. He was very strong in one particular skill set area. I was in another, and it made for a good mix. Neither of us could flesh out the idea completely on our own because we were lacking the skill set that the other brought to the table. So it's worked out to be, or at least I think so. He may beg to differ, but it's worked out to be a pretty good collaborative project that we're working on. I've also found, and I think somebody put something similar in the chat that I just saw go by, and I didn't read it completely, but I found that also collaborating with people that you meet at conferences that are outside of this discipline, but are overlapping. So for those of us who do sort of music business research that's on the management side, I think the suggestion in the chat was, you know, partnering with folks that they've met with at conferences like the Academy of Management. I tend to do things that fall more into the digital and social arena, which pops up a lot at marketing or communications conferences. So some of my other collaborations have come because I've met with people, I've gone to sessions at other conferences. So I find a lot of some of the marketing conferences will have sort of a catch-all everything else track that tends to cover things like tourism and entertainment and sports. I go to sessions there. I see what the researchers are working on in that space, and I see, you know, is this someone that I might want to work with? Can I talk to them about how to better flesh out the entertainment aspect of what they're looking at? So they are testing a marketing theory and using entertainment as the platform for testing that, and I can come in and help with that and say, okay, let's dig down more into this entertainment or music concept that you are just kind of using as not window dressing, but they're not as, you know, well versed, don't know some of those things. And so I've been able to pick up some co-authors that way, and then others have been by, as I'm doing literature reviews for work that I'm working on, you start to see certain authors pop up periodically, particularly if you're looking at certain methodological approaches, or people, you know, tend to orient themselves and become experts, as we mentioned, around different theories. So you start to see people pop up repeatedly. I've, you know, kind of taken a look and then reached out to some of those folks. So a couple of, at least one of my projects is I'm working on something with someone that I've just become more versed in their work, because I found that I was citing them often in the literature reviews that I was conducting for my own work.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Morgan. Stan, you had your hand up. Did you want to, and then I want to kind of move on after this.
I just wanted to backtrack to your comment about, folks co-authoring with industry people.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges there is that when you work with folks who are not in academia, they don't know how to write academic papers. And so, they might be bloggers, they might be folks, they write the way they write their story, they can share some data with you, but you're still going to end up doing all the writing.
You're right, Stan. The other thing that I want to, and he's exactly right, Stan's right. These people in many cases have huge egos. When you're talking to presidents, vice presidents, artists and all that stuff. But I've always found that if I approach them and I'm just confident and say, here's what's going on, here's what I want to know, you're an expert, tell me what you think. And the next thing you know, they'll start really getting to like you and trust you. I had one major producer who once said, I don't know who the hell you guys think you are, some academic person that's never done blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, let's talk about this specific problem you're having with this specific artist. And here's how I believe I can provide you some help. Next thing you know, he was calling me sir and professor and all that other stuff. But they do have big egos, so just a kind of a heads up.
Oh, thanks for sharing. I just want to mention one thing, and then we're going to move into funding resources. One of the things in our conversations with me, with Mehmet and Ulf and Jeremy and I, and also Armen, is with junior faculty. And Jeremy, actually, this topic exists right now because Jeremy was like, I'm a new faculty person, and what the hell do I do? I have to get published, and I have no idea how to navigate these waters. So first, let's have a talk. But is there a way that MEIEA could formalize a senior and a junior faculty mentorship program? Put that into place for those that are looking to publish. I mean, there's people like Stan and Larry and Clyde that have several articles that are published every year that could be really helpful. Jeremy, your thought on that was?
I think that would be super helpful, and I think it'll help grow the organization. I think that's something that would bring more junior faculty and more affiliate faculty. So maybe somebody who isn't necessarily teaching in the music business, but is a business faculty, anthropology faculty, history faculty, musicologist, who's really interested in our topic area, bring those into the organization because of that mentoring. I think it'd be a huge benefit. I know I'm benefiting a lot from the mentoring that's happening both within our department and even kind of unofficially at Wayne through our specific process as an R1 and how that works and the things that I need to do. But I know that I'm not the only person in that boat.
What I found, Jeremy, you're right. I went to the school, of course I was in the School of Business at the time, but I went to all those business faculty who are desperate to get published, absolutely desperate. And I would give them information that I would do, and we would work together and we would get published in major magazines and journals because nobody else in this world was doing anything on the entertainment industry they don't know what the hell it is all about. So if you partner with somebody who's on your faculty somewhere on your university campus that is desperate to get published, and find a subject you guys can work together in, and then you put it in their journal. It doesn't need to be in a music entertainment journal because most of them are not very relevant when you're looking at high level AACSB or whatever. But you put it in their journals and all of a sudden you become the guy. And then they start hitting on you. So, let's write together, blah, 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 blah. So just a thought. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks so much, Larry. So let's jump into funding resources. I kind of want to open forum it, but maybe Ulf, do you want to kick it off? Did you do some research to support that, or?
Yeah, it's interesting now in the COVID days where much of our research is going to be where we are living, or if we still have access to our office. The travel funds for this year, institutionally at least at Syracuse, have dried up. And I'm assuming that's the case with many of you as well. But we still may want to go out and try to get some funding to support the research that we are doing. We've been turning to some private industry at Syracuse and trying to do some work with volumetric capture for essentially concerts in virtual reality, and turning to the corporations. They've got a few extra dollars because they have an interest in people using their technology. That's one approach that we've taken. But you can also get grants from organizations like MEIEA. The National Endowments for the Arts maybe not be it's not the main focus for what we're doing because it's more organizational than individual. But keeping those in mind is important. Places like the Spencer Foundation also have grants available for academic researchers. And so it takes a little bit of digging, but certainly there are plenty of opportunities to go through and try to get some funding to support what you're doing.
So I'll bring Armen in just so we can qualify and clarify what the faculty research grant for MEIEA is. I understand gets it pretty much every year. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, the faculty research grant is, I believe, up to $3,000 that MEIEA has offered. And it's essentially to do a research project. MEIEA also has a student project grant. So if as a faculty member, you want to get a few $100s for a student project that you're doing on campus or with the students, that's available as well. With the MEIEA faculty research grant, we also offer, if you are the recipient of that grant, it's up to $3,000. It depends a little bit on how many apply. But if you do receive that grant, you are usually awarded a $500 travel grant to then attend and present your research at the following MEIEA summit. So it could be up to $3,500. And it's been very successful.
Well, thanks, Armen. One of the things that when we were talking about is like, what do I need money for? How am I going to apply? What do I need? 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000? So Stan, what are you using the money for? Can you tell us what your grant money has been used for?
I think I use most of the money either to get access to some kind of tool, either some programming, something like Chartmetric, for instance, or but most of the money goes to student help. And you can't use the money to pay yourself. MEIEA doesn't do that. But if you are doing a lot of labor-intensive research, meaning lots of field work, you need to collect information. If you did it by yourself, you could not meet the deadline of the grant. So you do need the help of folks that you mentor and you give them tasks to do. And that has helped me deliver some of these research projects that will take a year and a half to collect the data itself. So it's busy work, and you can't do it alone.
Thanks, Dan. Anybody else have any stories to share about grants or application of grants? I know Larry mentioned in the chat that he received over $100,000 from a nonprofit. That's an interesting perspective. Anyone else have anything they want to share about grants or the application of grant funding?
We can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, go ahead, sure.
We all have limited internal resources, depending on the institution that you have. You might have specific arts and humanities research programs. I've seen I know there's one that exists at Wayne State, and a fair amount of universities have that to sort of prop up the non-scientific, non-NSF kind of research that goes on in many of our departments. Sometimes there's matching funds too, and these programs that exist that aren't very well utilized at a lot of research or at a lot of institutions. Additionally, there's sometimes funding. Obviously, it depends on the level of research and what you're having them do, but undergraduate research opportunity programs, which can help pay undergrads to do some research, so initial data gathering, so on and so forth. In terms of external resources, I've found there's a fair amount, and I have a list which I can share or add to perhaps the white paper that we're working on, of resources that support archival recordings. So if you're working on the recording end of things, think the National Endowment for the Humanities, Grammy Foundation, National Recording Preservation Foundation, and so on and so forth, support stabilizing, archiving, digitizing those sort of resources. One last place to look externally could be looking at, for instance, the territory. So if you're working outside of the US and you're focusing on a specific country, that would be Germany, the UK, there are research grants in the arts and culture that tend to be a little bit broader or more open than we have in the United States. I'm working on a project for Iceland, and there's 3 or 4 resources where I can apply to through foundations there for funding. I'm working on that process right now. And co-authorship, it can be a good way to get around any sort of territorial restriction sometimes.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. All right, so we got about 15 minutes left. I know that Mehmet has a survey that he's going to post. We're going to put the white paper up there for you guys, the research resources and et cetera. But so the last topic is publications, right? And, I've got 3 categories. There's peer-reviewed journals, there's trade journals, there's consumer publications. Let's just take those 3. Most institutions, if you're tenure track, it's got to be peer-reviewed and it's got to be double-blind peer-reviewed. And I don't even know. I've been published a number of times, and Larry was giving me all these acronyms for what Belmont requires. I don't even know what he's talking about when he says AA this or whatever that is. What is that? Can anybody comment on that? Like minimum standards outside of double-blind peer-reviewed?
AACSB is the business school accreditation agency, and so because Belmont's music business program is accredited along with the business school, the faculty in the College of Entertainment and Music Business, if you're in the music business teaching side, you have to adhere to the business school requirements.
Right. Double-blind peer-reviewed, is that what we're sort of accustomed to? Is that the basic standard that meets the requirements for publishing as a tenure track faculty? Any other lesser requirements? And Scott, I know you're tenure track, but you're not even required to publish, right? You're a teaching institution, right?
You're right, we're a teaching institution, but it's one of those things that it's heavily recommended, and I've taken like 6 pages of notes today, so I'll probably be reaching out to many of you and the Chartmetric team to look at ideas for next year.
I know that
highly encouraged. What I can, just to reference what you were talking about earlier today, we do accept popular publication. So pieces that have gone out in our local papers, pieces that have gotten picked up by local blogs. For a teaching institution, that has helped, especially as all of our institutions are looking at recruitment and retention heavily in these coming months and years.
Jeremy, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, those kind of things are all part of our professional record too, and they can definitely, like, the research translation part can be really helpful in making a tenure case, because you're looked at as an expert in the field and can push forward, or people come to you as an expert in the field. So if you're able to translate the research outside of the double blind peer-reviewed journals, that's important. However, that being said, in talking with my dean and my chair, I was given, okay, do this amount of things per year, and you should have no problem on the tenure track thing. And so having those kind of blunt conversations with the administration can be really helpful to figure out where you should be publishing, what kind of things you should be publishing.
Has anyone had any experience in repurposing the research that was prospectively going to be in a journal, but then taking segments of that research and publishing it in Billboard or iPod or Trade or even a local publication? Can anybody talk about that? Stan? Go ahead, Stan.
I mean, most universities have a pretty good PR department, some kind of communication department in your school. And, sometimes they look for interest pieces to pitch to the news. So if you did some research that has been published, in some kind of journal that, they think they can pitch to some kind of news outlets, TV stations, different bloggers, different, trade journals, that helps. But usually you have to be pretty proactive about this. They're not going to, go after you unless they're really good at doing like Google alerts about their group of faculty members and see kind of like what pops up about you. But in most instances, that has helped me. So when I did the piece with Courtney Blankenship on pop music, we covered the last election cycle. and that got a Forbes, article. So that's been good. And then the way media outlets work is one of these outlets, news outlet, gets the story and then they sell it to other ones. So if you get a top media outlet like Forbes or something like that, then your stuff is going to pop up all over the place. Now, you have no control about the narrative. They say crazy things about you. That's not true, but you can't do anything about that, So just my 2 cents. Yeah.
Anyone else have any experience in repurposing, like Stan mentioned? Teasing it, using it as a resource locally or with trades. What about repurposing, having research that could be used in multiple disciplines? Like you've had a research project and then you repurpose it for another journal. I'm not saying change the title and publish it somewhere else. I'm talking about like adapting your research in many different ways. Jeremy, have you?
So sometimes the case studies can actually come out of those things. So one of this Iceland project I'm hoping to work on, I hope to write a case study based on the paper that I'm hoping to put in someplace like organization studies, and use that same data, pull that out, and write a case study about the management process of Iceland Airways Music Festival. So that happens a fair amount. Those teaching cases kind of come out of there. And those sort of partnerships with local, sometimes, if you're focusing on a specific area, again, my interests tend to be on scenes, regional kind of things. You may be able to partner after you've done the research, it's been double blind approved and you haven't been necessarily biased by the process. You can then take it, go back to the tourism agencies and sort of help have them work as a publishing or a promotion agency for you.
Within that local community, town, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I posted the white paper, by the way, so it's a Google Doc. You can view it if you want to take a look at some of those resources. Also, Mehmet posted the survey, a SurveyMonkey poll that we would like you to take. So if you don't mind clicking on that. So while we have the white paper up, and I know you're probably clicking and looking, I thought, Ulf, could you talk a little bit about that and your process and what your findings were and what our goals are with creating this research doc?
Yeah, I've been at Syracuse. This will be my 16th year teaching here. And, one of the questions that came up throughout my time was, where will you publish? And, because we have so few music business journals, that conversation has been one that's been fairly consistent over the last decade and a half. And so looking to other journals outside of music is really important for our discipline. And we all know that all journals are not created equally. And we're starting to see a little bit more of a quantifiable difference between the value of certain journals over others, whether it's the site score or the impact factor that you often find with each of these. You might find that there are articles out there with 6 citations ever. And that begs the question, was that research impactful at all? And it might look great on your CV, but if nobody's citing it, then it's not really contributing to the larger conversation within academia. And so, this is the beginning of a list, a little over 30 other journals that have published music business research. And, some are in the areas of law, some are ethics, some are international, some are business focused. And it's, I think, important for us as an organization to build out this resource list because I know many of you on this call, and we've been at conferences together and, had these conversations before, but the new faculty, the new ones that are coming through really need to see this from the get-go. I wish that I had this 15, 16 years ago, and building this out now will give us an opportunity to prepare people for this process. And so that's why we were going through and looking at this. It's not comprehensive. Not every journal that publishes music business research is there, but it is our jumping off point. And hopefully this will give you some opportunity to look at other locations for your research as you continue to research during at least this COVID time.
And just to add to what Ulf just mentioned, this actually created, my sound is kind of like coming from the box here. You're good. Okay. So this came out of our conversations that the 4 of us were having, Jeremy, Ulf, Terry, and myself. And it's an ongoing living document. So we want to make sure that this is up to date, this is updated. So if you have any recommendations, anything that's not in there that you see right now, please put it in the chat box or put it in the survey. The last question of the survey is like any additional recommendations. So we want to make sure that this is up to date. We want to make sure this is useful and this is circulated. This is just the start. I really feel that, you know, having had something like, I'm on my 4th year tenure track, and if I had this early on, it would have really helped me scope out sort of like, you know, the next 5-6 years before I'm going up for PNT. And but in any case, it's a useful document. It's sort of like our first stab at, you know, culling from our experiences and putting everything on, you know, a piece of paper. So please feel free to contribute and let us know what can be added here.
Fantastic. So the best way to contribute, because that's where I was going, the survey that you posted, they could answer that. But what about ongoing, Ulf and Mehmet? Is there an email address? Is it, because they don't have edit opportunity, right? So what's the best way we can continue building on this doc?
We do have resources at MEIEA.org as an email for all resources, you know, this topic in particular, but if there are other resources for other endeavors that we might be engaging with, that's always open for you to suggest other opportunities for collaboration, or, you know, the journals that are out there or databases that might pop up. So that's something that you can use outside of this conversation as well.
Fantastic. All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to add, or do we want to go all eat lunch? I think it's a wrap. Armen, do you want to close this, wrap this puppy?
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Thanks everyone for attending today. Thanks for all the ideas and resources. We'll follow up by the end of today or early tomorrow at the latest with the links we shared, as well as the survey, as well as for those of you who are new to MEIEA, I will include a link for you to essentially sign up for a free year of membership. And so we look forward to seeing you guys future MEIEA meets. Just make sure to check our Facebook page and LinkedIn, find us there, and we are pretty active. I know Terry runs that pretty well, so thank you.
What's the next meets? What is our next meets?
Next meets, I believe Kelly, if she's still on the call, Kelly is doing one on private lessons with, you know, with COVID shutting down a lot of schools. How are you going to teach private lessons via Zoom? So that is, I believe, next week. And then the week after that, I know Eric is on the call and he's doing one with regarding live venues in the age of COVID. Again, you can sign up for all these. It's on our Facebook page is the link, which is the same form you guys filled out for today. So
sounds great. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. Look forward to seeing you again. Cheers.